I'm Dylan Kight, and this is No Destination. Every song starts with a story, a moment, a mistake, a conversation you can't quite let go of. In this podcast, we trace those roads and we see where they lead, through the songs of Late Bloomer in a Wallflower Suit and beyond. Episode 6. This is about the long way around. This song kicks off side 2 of the record, and that was very intentional. The lift going into side 2, which in my mind is a dreamier side of the sonic world of the record, but it's a great way to enter the second half. It has a driving pulse to it, and live, it's actually probably my favorite song to play. That's when we're really reaching for the rafters, no matter how small the venue. But it has this quality where it begs to be played fast and loud. But the song didn't start that way. Like a lot of these songs, it started as a very quiet song, almost like a folk song. And, we weren't looking for transcendence. We were south of nowhere. You better call your mama. If you've ever been in a relationship of any length, you know that there are seasons in relationships. And there are times where you're closer together, you drift further apart. And then hopefully what the constant is the thing that pulls you back to center together. And this is a song that was inspired by a really great conversation with my wife. And not that we were far apart, but it was just one of those conversations where you felt like you really talked about some of those big things in life. We've both lost parents, singular, each, and so we both have had that experience and both navigating that. And just what that looks like, hopefully you haven't experienced it, but if you've experienced grief, you know that grief kind of comes in waves. When she lost her mom, so difficult of a thing to go through. And as time goes on, you're able to remember things without the immediate sadness of the loss. So you start to remember the good things or the stories with more perspective. This conversation just went really deep about life and what's important and those kind of things. It was one of those conversations where I felt really inspired after we had this conversation. And that's really the inspiration of the song, as a conversation about connecting deeply with somebody about life's big things. And so in that first verse, we weren't looking for transcendence. We were south of nowhere. You better call your mama. She won't always be around. One of the topics, if I could remember correctly, is this idea that you're always someone's baby until you're not, right? And the difficult thing is when you ever have to cross this mountain, but you always feel like someone's baby until you're not, right? Like it's just one of those things where when you have that generation between you and the great beyond gone, somehow things feel more inevitable. They feel more just like a matter of time versus this thing that's like, oh, this only happens to really old people or to people of a certain age. So when you lose a parent, you have that hurdle to go through. And so that second verse, you'll always be someone's baby until you're not. And someday there'll be nothing between you and the great beyond. And that probably encapsulates the most personal part of the conversation. But when you lose a parent, so many things that you go through. And we've talked in previous episodes about what that was like when I lost my dad. But, that idea that there's nothing between you, there's not a generation anymore between you and death, and like what that feels like. And it's big and it's scary. It still feels like a canyon, but somehow it's more in view than it's ever been. But then there's this idea of like, well, what's beyond the canyon of the great beyond? What is that next chapter? And I think there's a lot of different ways to talk about that. But the way that I do in the song is that baby, even believers, they don't want to die. They were promised heaven, but they're still afraid to fly. In the sense that, I grew up, with family that was very religious. No one's trying to circumvent life to get to the afterlife, even if you believe that it's paradise, right? And so it's this idea that even when you're promised paradise, you're still not trying to go at any point ahead of your time. You want to be here for as long as possible. And so those first 3 verses are really about that the conversation between my wife and I, and about these bigger topics in life and what that feels like to go through, and to have the space where grief is not something that's staring you in the face. It's now a window where you see your own inevitability and what comes next, and how different that is, and what that feels like to wrestle with as a person. And the first chorus happens. And what I like about this song is every chorus is different. So, there's a lot of really big choruses on the record. But what I like is when you're able to use a chorus as a part of a way to move the story forward. So you can just repeat the same lyrics over and over again in each chorus, and that has a powerful impact. But I think if you can somehow keep that chorus big, but still moving the story forward, like that's where the magic happens a little bit. Like that's insider baseball. The challenge as a songwriter was how to keep propelling this idea, this feeling. And so the first chorus comes, take me down the long way around. Tell me how it hurts when you think about it. Take me down the long way around. And that's, it's like, what is the long way around? Again, I want to give space to whatever that is to you. For me, that's like, let's get into the deep stuff. Let's get into where you're having to walk through that deep water. And even though you're pulling your pants up almost to your knees, it's still getting the bottom of those jeans wet. Let's get into the deep stuff. And that's that idea of take me down all the way. Tell me how this hurts. That chorus is calling out to that person on the other side of the conversation. There's this realization that life is short. You'll only be someone's baby for so long. But even if you believe in heaven, you probably still don't want to leave ahead of your time. Now, we come out of that, and it goes right back into the verse. And this is more existential and probably more about the individual than the conversation. So the perspective changes a little bit. What's it meant to be human? Hell, I don't even know. My favorite songs are sad and slow, but they still give me hope. That's all me. I definitely like sad songs. What is it, the idea to be human? I don't know. And the idea that someone could derive happiness from sadness is part of the human struggle. It's like, how do you process life? Because it's not if you're going to go through big things or scary things or sad things or happy things. It's how do those things change you? How do they inform that future self? And, it's a plug for my absolute love for sad songs. So there you go. And there's this idea about love, right? So there's familial love that happens in the first couple verses. And then there's this introduction of a person that's obviously a part of the conversation in the first chorus. So the last verse before the second chorus is, they say love can't be unbroken, but love can break your heart. I don't believe in forever, but it ain't too late to start. So the forever is not about love. Forever in this context is more about faith in something. As someone who is very sure of what they think about, my mind could be changed in some way to something different at some point, right? But it's wrapped up in the idea that somehow in my mind, it's similar to love, whatever that is, God or a higher power. This idea, they say that love can't be unbroken, but it can also break your heart, is sort of like an interesting thing to hold in your hand at the same time. And then that next part is, I don't believe in forever, but it ain't too late to start. So, as a songwriter, there's this thing that happens where, let's just take Long Way Around. I played it as soon as the lyrics and the music started to come together. I played it. I recorded a demo on my phone, and immediately I knew that it was good. I was like, okay, this works as a song. And then you play it for the first time. I remember the first time I played it, it didn't go over great. It didn't go over bad, but it wasn't like, it was just a thing. It was a song in the set. But sometimes as a songwriter, it needs to stand on its own two legs. And even if the audience doesn't give you that feedback, that's fine. Sometimes in that, there's a power in knowing that, like, this does work. And they just need to hear it again. Or this does work, it's just, the wrong night, the right room, or the wrong room. And that can have like a real galvanizing effect. The analogy I've given to other songwriters, it's when you play a song for the first time, it's like telling somebody that you love them out loud for the first time. Like you have all those feelings in your head about like, well, I think I like this person a lot. I know I like them a lot. How do I tell them? And then when you think the big L's coming, it's like, well, how do I say it? And it's probably the first time you've ever said it to that person out loud. And it feels way different. And so that's how it is playing a song. Sometimes you play a song and it gets great reception, but you're able to know exactly what about it didn't work because you've said the thing out loud now. You've played it to somebody else. But, I would shorten the second verse. It's kind of, you write enough songs, you start to kind of learn what feels right and when it doesn't feel right. Moving to the second chorus. So again, we're going to use this as an opportunity to move the story forward. So we're now talking about the human condition, the human struggle of what does it mean to exist, right? And that you could still find hope in sad things, kind of like grief. The story I think about is when Roy Orbison died. Now, Roy Orbison is a fantastic singer, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys were ever into the Traveling Wilburys. As a child, I assumed all of those guys were like in their 60s. They just seemed old. Very old. I got to a point in my 30s where I saw a picture online and they had the ages of the Traveling Wilburys above their heads. And what was shocking is like Tom Petty was in his late 30s. George Harrison was in his early 40s. Jeff Lynne was in his 40s. And like Roy Orbison was the oldest one, like 52 or something. And I was like, wow, that is wild. Anyway, Roy Orbison died. If you didn't know that, this was before social media. This was like in the late 80s, early 90s. I can't remember the exact year, but this isn't a historical podcast. This is a podcast about my song. So apologies in advance for not having that information prepared. But the story still goes that George Harrison found the news out and he called Tom Petty. And Tom Petty picked up the phone and George said, "Tom, did you hear?" And Tom's like, "I ain't hear anything." And George Harrison goes, "Roy, he died." And Tom's like, "Oh my gosh," whatever he said, like that's terrible. And there was a pause, and then George Harrison goes, "But aren't you glad it wasn't you?" Like that's also maybe a quiet part out loud about grief, is that like as stunning of a sad thing as it can be, it does make you appreciate the finite aspect of life and like, hey, I still have some runway. Like it's not my turn yet, right? And that's a very small part of it. Grief is terrible, and you lose somebody so close to you, you're not even thinking about positive things. But, bear with me. As someone who has a dark sense of humor, that is something that kind of goes through the dome, right? But anyway, so we get to the second chorus. Take me down the long way around. Tell me how your parents met and how it fucked you up when they split. Take me down the long way around. So again, it's kind of going back to the conversation that I had with my wife and talking about both of the divorces that we had to go through as children. Maybe it's you just meeting someone for the first time. Maybe it's even just a friend. And you start finding out all these things about them, and you just want to hear about their experience and how it shaped them. And this very much like that. Like, hey, tell me how it messed you up. Like, it messed me up. I'm confident. And this is how long I had to go to therapy to try to undo some of those things. So again, grief, and like, it's more this conversation, but it's this idea that like, tell me everything. Like, your truths are something that I can carry and listen to. And I don't have to have an opinion on anything, but you can tell me the big things, the scary things, and we can have those kind of conversations. And the bridge comes after the second chorus. Why is everyone so serious? Don't they know that no one makes it out? So it's this idea like, well, why are we being so precious? Not that there shouldn't be decorum and respect and reverence in very serious situations. When my dad died, my sister and I were making jokes at the viewing because you just got to do what you got to do. And maybe that's always been a part of my coping mechanisms. We'll call it coping. But my wife has a terrific sense of humor as well. And we both use humor as a superpower. And so we both make fun of things that we absolutely shouldn't. So again, it's just kind of pulling from that really. But it's this idea that nothing is off limits because, we're the ones going through it. We're the ones living our lives. And, if we can laugh about it and obviously be serious and respectful, that's obviously part of it. But no one makes it off this thing alive. I'm not saying you should be disrespectful at all, but the idea that you can't try to find the humor in things is just my coping mechanism. Don't let me push that on you. But this is my podcast, so that's what you get. And then we get the big last chorus. So, take me down the long way around, big hearts and wild dreams. Nothing is perfect or as perfect as it seems. Take me down the long way around. So it becomes more universal in that last chorus, and it becomes more hopeful because that's what the conversation made me feel. I didn't feel sad or bogged down or like, oh my gosh, these are such big things to have to process or to think about. It's that, at the end of these big, long conversations with a friend or a parent or a spouse, a partner, that hopefully it brings you closer together. And this idea that, like, once you process life's bigger things, that, hey, don't forget, like, we've got big hearts and wild dreams. And this idea that nothing is perfect or as perfect as it seems is okay, right? Like, there's times where I'm sure on the outside looking in, people thought, man, Dylan's crushing it. And there were times where I probably looked like I was struggling way harder than I was. So that's the long way around. That's kind of like how it originated. The cool thing is live, it's more of a rallying cry when we play it as a band. Even though it started off as this kind of slow, meditative, like folk song, it's really kind of, everybody feeling it. And because we've all had to overcome something. And yeah, take us down the long way around. Like, we got this. And it's interesting how live the song it comes across very resilient. And that's how I felt. I think that's great. Not all the times does a folk song become one that you play fast or that people connect with, but maybe more than any other song on the record, The Long Way Around is one that gets probably the most feedback when we play it live. And so I'm very fortunate for that. One of the things that I think is not appreciated enough about the record, if I could, is Andy LeMaster's bass playing. So what's driving the song? Now live, it's different. Live, it's like this whole other animal. It's the whole band kind of pushing and opening up to this chorus. On the recording, though, it's Andy's wonderful bass playing that is really propelling the song into each one of these sections. I'm a very heavy-handed rhythm guitar player. It's just the way I play guitar. I strum a lot. I don't do a lot of single line stuff. When Andy came up with that bass part, it kind of reframed the recording like, oh yeah, this is what pushes it forward. And then we kind of backed off some of the guitar stuff. And I think that's what makes the song really kind of work, is there's a lot of space in the verses. And there's these great harmonies that happen. But there was a very intentional conversation about this song specifically because, it does sound big, because it is big and it feels great. And there's a natural inclination to say, like, hey, how do we rise to this moment? And there are songs that do, a lot of songs that are great at that. But where could we zig here instead of zag? And I'll introduce to you the Andy LeMaster vocal solo. And it was just I can't remember exactly how it came to be, honestly. It's something that he heard and he recorded, and it was just like, I think originally it was going to be like a placeholder. Like, he just wanted to have this idea to go back later and maybe build on or add an instrument that was doing that melody. So like a keyboard or an organ or something. But we knew we didn't want it to be a guitar. We didn't want it to be that on the nose. That just seemed like the most obvious thing. Like, there's this big song, and then now we're going to have this big guitar hero moment. That's what I love about working with Andy, is like, how can we think about this differently? And he sung it, and it was going to be a placeholder. I was like, no, I think that's what it should be. because it's like this angelic thing because he's got this beautiful voice. It lifts the song into this kind of other place that totally connected with the vibe of the lyrics way better than just this huge, ripping, roaring guitar solo. For those that see us live, there are no angels in the band. And that's no offense to any of us as singers, but I don't know if any of us could pull off what Andy did, because such a beautiful part. And I'm so fortunate that that exists on the record, and that he followed me down that path to not do the most obvious thing right there. Andy just absolutely crushed it. And that starts the second side. These 4 sessions that make up the record were in such a way that it just turns out that it's almost like what you're hearing on the record is almost like in reverse. That last session was Worst of Me, High and Lonesome, Dark Water, and then Long Way Around. I mean, that's most of side 1, but saving Long Way Around to the second side, it kind of kicks it off and hits it into this other gear, was very intentional. The songs that come after it were on the first sessions, and what's interesting to me, and I'm sure this is just to me, but it's a podcast about Uno, myself. I don't know what Uno's one, but I don't know what I was going with that. It's about my perspective of it. But the other thing that I think happens is it kind of gives way to this dreamier version of the sonic world of Late Bloomer in a Wallflower Suit. So where there's like Worst of Me and High and Lonesome, Pulaski, Something in the Darkness. And even Dark Water is very much rooted kind of in that same kind of sonic foundation. Long Way Around is the most up-tempo song on the record. But Andy's beautiful angelic voice gives way to the end of the song. And then you get these dreamier songs. And now some of them still rock, like Good Trouble, I think, is still a great song. Gardenia has this great kind of like Stooges outro, which I can't wait to talk about. The rest of the songs on the record get like dreamier and dreamier and dreamier. And it's just interesting to me that that's how the sonic journey happened, that it's almost in reverse of how they were recorded. And so we'll talk in later episodes about where the sound, I think, is going and about what's next. But The Long Way Around is a really pivotal song. And it's a song that in the records that I've made, and I've been fortunate to make a bunch of solo records and some band records, but every record's got a long way around. It's like the song that you look forward to playing the most. And it's a song that almost didn't make the record. And that is still wild to me, that it was almost one that we didn't even record. Here we are. Now it's kicking off side 2, and the rest, they say, is Late Bloomer in a Wallflower Suit history. So that is The Long Way Around. I'm so grateful for the positive feedback and the folks that have reached out since I've started to do this podcast and put up video content, something I was always very hesitant to do, mainly because I have a face for radio, and mainly because even if I was going to do radio, I didn't know what the heck I was going to talk about. It's been really gratifying to have other songwriters, people who've connected with the music, people who connect with a different side of the music in a deeper way now because they heard a story. So I really appreciate everybody who's reached out, been supportive. That just means a lot. And to this point, I have not done that thing that most people do, and I've been told that I should. So this is the part of the episode where I tell you, if you do enjoy this podcast or this video on YouTube, to please like and subscribe. And if you're so inclined, share it with a friend. This is going to be an ongoing series that we do. And right now it's about the songs on the record. There's a lot of exciting stuff up on the horizon. And the cool thing is we go into record the next record. We will have a series similar to this that I'm already kind of mapping up and dreaming up. So that's the exciting thing. In these episodes, you don't hear me talk about what I'm doing or the show that I played last weekend or the band, so that these song-specific things are evergreen. It does help tremendously when you do subscribe and share this podcast or this video with a friend. Thank you guys so much. It's been an honor to share these stories with you. And until next time.